interivew.com.
Tim, you mentioned in your book that how important it is to hire for attitude above and beyond skill and experience, which makes a lot of sense. But how can you tell when everybody comes in for an interview and they're always going to put their best foot forward, so they're always going to be so damn nice? How can you sort of go beyond that? Because sometimes you hire somebody very nice in the interview and they come in and then suddenly they have a personality transformation and that nice personality goes out the door. How can you prevent that at an interview stage?
I can smell attitude in somebody if I'm concentrating hard enough in an interview very, very quickly. And it is so important. And bad attitude, particularly any company which is looking out towards the consumer, bad attitude in staff can be absolutely, totally disastrous. I tell a story, I think I tell it in that book, I certainly tell it to you now, which is British Airways. It was some years ago, and I'm seriously deaf in both ears, and I have been for almost all my life. So I've got used to it, and I deal with it. But in certain circumstances, I cannot hear a word, often with women, and if anybody turns away from me, because I clearly partly lip read, although I'm not really aware of it. But there was an instance a few years ago when I was driving out to Heathrow, and it was the early days of electronic tickets. And as I was driving out to Heathrow, I passed an enormous advertising campaign for British Airways. I mean, I was driving out and I was thinking, my God, that must be costing them millions to do this thing. And it was all about the friendly airline was. And I go out to Heathrow, and early days of electronic tickets, and I didn't totally understand what I was supposed to do with my ticket number. I got so used to having a paper ticket. And I got into the queue for the customer desk, and then it came a bit late, and eventually I came up to the desk, and there was the British Airways clerk behind the counter. And I started to say what I wanted to ask her, and she turned away from me, which is fine, and turned away from me to get her file out, or and she answered me with looking the other direction. Now, if anybody does that, particularly if a woman does, I mean, I just cannot literally hear a word. I can't pick out, she'd be speaking Swahili. I just could not hear anything at all. So when she turned around again, I said, look, I'm terribly sorry, I couldn't hear. Do you mind repeating it? I'm deaf. And she said to me, gave me the answer to my question and said, can you hear me now? And the aggression was just appalling. And you could feel people behind me sort of shrinking away in embarrassment. And I just sort of turn away from that. And I hate rudeness. I mean, it really, really upsets me, physically upsets me. And I turned away and I thought, my God, that woman single-handed, is writing off millions of pounds worth of British Airways advertising, destroying all relationships. I then got on the plane and met somebody else, a steward, and was completely charming about this, that, and the other. And I thought, these good people really. But it was an incredible example, I think, of how somebody with a bad attitude facing out to the public can just be appalling the damage they can do. It's a bad story.
Wow. So as you said, hire for attitude, train for skill. That's a great.
Yeah.
That's a great.
You can do that. If the attitude is good enough, you can train. I don't say you take on something complete dumb, but I mean, the skill is important. The attitude is absolutely vital, and the attitude is more important than the skill. If the attitude is absolutely brilliant and the skill is at a good level, you can train it up. If the skill is great but the attitude is appalling, you're absolutely lost.
Bevo.com